Listen to this. It is quite an interesting pay back the money style story. And it involves a software company, Systems Applications Products, or SAP, as you might know it. They've agreed to pay back over 81 million rand to the Department of Water Affairs and Sanitation. The Special Tribunal has confirmed the settlement agreement entered into between that software company and the Department of Water. Earlier this year, SAP was ordered to pay over 400 million rand of over R1 billion in software license contracts. Now, it was found the department irregularly concluded software license and support agreements with SAP. Well, to tell us all about it, I'm joined now by Special Tribunal spokesperson Selby Makgotho. Selby, thank you so much for your time. So this 81 million is just the last part of a very large amount of money that the software company has had to pay back to the Department of Water Affairs and Sanitation. I wonder if you could take us back to 2015, to the heart of the problem and how it began.
Thank you very much, Sally. Good evening to the viewers. It's indeed an honor to be here tonight. What I can indicate is that in 2015 and 2016, what we found as a special tribunal was that the service provider in question, that is the Systems Application Products Pty Ltd, entered into the multi-million contracts worth over 400 million with the Department of Water Affairs and Sanitation. That was for the software licensing and support at the department at the time. So pursuant to the entering of the two contracts, that is in December 2015 and again in July 2016, an amount of 413 million, was paid into this SAP service provider for that function. But what they disregarded at the time was that there was a 2012 agreement in place. So when this special tribunal was approached by the applicants in this particular instance, was to review and set aside the contract on the basis of its unconstitutionality, that it ought to be reviewed and set aside. On the 22nd of March, we granted that order to recover an amount of 413 million rands. But during litigation process, the parties came together and proposed a settlement agreement amongst themselves that they came to the special tribunal for that settlement agreement to be made an order of court. In the process, an amount of 81.5 million was in dispute, and part of the dispute was on the premise that it related to the payments that were made to third parties, and the dispute in question has since been resolved. But I must also indicate at this point that we were not happy initially with the settlement agreement, the terms and conditions thereof, on the basis that they were not legally competent. The judge of the presiding judge, Judge Lebogang Modiba, was not happy with the terms and conditions. She sent the parties back to come with a legally competent order, and that is why today we granted it.
All right, so talk to me. In total, how much does SAP have to pay back to the Water Department?
Cumulatively is 413 million. That is inclusive of the 81.5 million that was paid today.
That's a massive amount.
When we granted the...
Yeah, I just want to ask a quick follow-up question, because I was reading the statement, and the statement says that the agreements did not comply with a section of the Constitution, the PFMA, Treasury regulations, the Department's supply chain management policies. Surely it is beholden on both the software company SAP and the Department of Water to make sure that those agreements complied with those regulations. Why is it SAP solely having to pay all that money back and no sanction for the Department of Water for also not making sure the contracts were in order?
Well, the evidence that was presented to the special tribunal did point out to those irregularities in the main, non-compliance with Section 217 of the Constitution regarding the fairness, transparency, and competitive bidding processes. One other finding that we made was that it was in contravention with the Public Finance Management Act, Treasury regulations, as well as the department's own supply chain management processes. But again, one of the part of the evidence that was presented to us was to the effect that this was actually a collaboration between the departmental officials, erstwhile most of them, some of the employees of the service providers, that is SAP, as well as some of the partners who came in as third parties. So we rely on the evidence and the testimonies that come before the special tribunal, and the evidence solely pointed to the SAP as the ones that needed to be pursued, and that is why they are the ones that are being ordered to pay within the
I
next
hear
5
you,
court days.
but you talk about this elaborate scheme, and you say, and you've just told me it was devised by employees of SAP, but also former employees of the department. Are you pursuing criminal action against those employees?
At this stage, no. We did not pursue any other evidence that was not part of the process before the special tribunal. What was before the special tribunal was to recover the monies, and now because the parties came during litigation process, it was agreed. But I must indicate, Sally, that there is nothing wrong if ever any other law enforcement agency, based on the findings of the special tribunal or any other court for that matter, need to pursue the criminal activities or whatever form of recovery that needs to take place. Our judgments are very, very clear. And where there is a need, for instance, for any other law enforcement agency to pursue such, nothing stops them.
I see. I mean, I have to ask you this question. It's such an interesting day that this comes through. Bain & Company has been banned from doing business with government in South Africa for a decade. Bain says it's totally unfair. They've paid back the money. They've taken action against the people within their company that were corrupt. I mean, it's a similar situation to what you're telling me that SAP got up to. Is this something you would endorse moving forward on, that a company like SAP should also perhaps consider that they need to be further sanctioned? Should we consider a further sanction? Because there's always this criticism that government employees get hammered, but sometimes the businesses seem to get away with it. We're seeing the tide turning. Could SAP be in line for further sanction, you think?
Well, regarding the Bain company, what has actually happened is that, remember, South Africa is actually following what has been done already in the UK. And from what we heard is that the US is also being lobbied to ban the UK, to ban Bain company. What we are actually concerned with as a special tribunal is the recovery of the money. And where it is proven on a balance of probabilities that the money has indeed gone to hands for wrongful purposes, it ought to be recovered. And one of the things that actually an important lesson that South Africa ought to learn, be it in the form of SAP, is that this actions should actually serve as a deterrent to whoever think that they might come to South Africa and commit whatever crime. We have taken note of what the UK ban has done, and South Africa, actually, the government of South Africa should actually be commended, because any other person who might be of the view that he or she might need to commit crimes will actually be deterred. And in our view, this is actually a very good deterrent.
Yeah, and so I suppose is having to pay back the money. And as you've explained, this 81 million paid back by SAP to the Water Department is just the last part of a 413 million amount that has now been paid back. Thank you so much for telling us all about that. Special Tribunal spokesperson, Selby Makgotho.